This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. Every day is a maze in life. We can plan all we want, but you know what? Something just like changes. Uh, and that actually happened for today because my guest was scheduled to come on about 30 minutes ago, and I had to go run to a very important appointment. And so we had to switch things up. And some of us don't like change. Uh, in fact, my husband is one. Uh, if things could be the same day after day after day, he'd be the happiest guy in the world. But as soon as something changes, it's like, what am I supposed to do? But we can avoid that hectic scene of change if we can become adaptable. And that's sort of what we need. My guest today is Nicole Stanfield. And I met Nicole on podmatch.com, a great group of people. Many are podcasters, some are just guests. Um, but Nicole, you are a coach. And what I'm
Mhm.
finding recently, and I didn't realize how many people were out there coaching. Um, there once was a time when you heard the word coach, you thought of a football team, a basketball team, a
Mhm.
baseball team. You
Yeah.
didn't think of somebody who you would go to and talk to them about how you're sort of stuck, whether it be in business, your life, relationship. Um, and going to a coach is different than going to a therapist.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into coaching.
Good question. I'm so excited to be here. So, I definitely used to think the same thing about coaching. If I would have heard coach, I would have been like, oh, so you coach people to do a sport, right? You're a sports coach. And so, part of that journey for me was doing some personal development myself and realizing that I had things that I didn't like, or things that were frustrating, or things that I wish I didn't respond in a certain way. I wanted to respond differently, and I didn't know what to do about that. And then I had someone who was like, hey, why don't you try this personal development conference and see if that helps with some of these things we're talking about? And it did, and it really helped shift me, and it helped change my perspective on some things in my life. And so then I did a few more, and I really focused on that personal development. And then I realized that I wanted to help other people who were in a similar situation and didn't know kind of where they were at and wanted to get more in touch with themselves, what they were feeling, how they were managing their emotions, how stuff was coming up for them, working through challenging things. And so that's kind of where that journey started. But then what was interesting that happened at the same point, because life, right?
Right.
Life.
We lost your sound. That is interesting. Let's hold on one second. Let's see if it's on this end. No.
I had to figure out a way to handle it, basically handle my stuff, right? And so the same time as I was like, okay, I want to do this coaching thing, I was experiencing burnout, but I didn't realize what was happening because it happened over the course of about 6 months for me.
Ooh.
And so as an entrepreneur, I found some things showing up for me, like, and this can happen for anybody, right? So some of the signs were that I would finish a project and then I wouldn't be proud of that. I would be like, oh, the client won't like it. Oh, they'll be dissatisfied. Or I would go to a meeting, a digital meeting, and then afterwards I would just be so angry and frustrated afterwards. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. I would be like, this made me mad, and this made me mad, and this made me mad. And then I would get like a client email, and it would frustrate me because they were always so needy. And so these were things that I didn't realize were part of the signs of burning out, actually. And so as I was going on that journey, like I have several businesses that I'm running at the same time. So I'm starting my coaching business and I'm burning out from my marketing business.
Ah,
And I realized that I had some really toxic habits and just choices that I had made that nobody had sat me down and said, "Why are you doing this?" And I had taken my goals for what I wanted to accomplish and made them everything. And then I sacrificed my physical health, my mental health, and my emotional health in order to work towards them. And I accomplished them financially, but at the cost of my health, basically.
sure.
And so I got to a point in my burnout where I realized that I had to walk away from my biggest client where I was making the most money, of course. And that was so hard. And I really didn't want to do that. And I lost $20,000 in that decision. And it was so hard to do. And that change that I had to work through was was really scary.
You know, just hearing the bits and pieces that you're talking about, um, we all go through this, and yet we don't put a name to it. Um, and oftentimes we blame other people because we're doing what we think is right. Um, but as we're doing that, because it's not quite right, it is bringing us down. And it's interesting because I talk to people like yourself all the time. Um, and I keep, saying to myself, I know better. And yet in the last couple weeks, because of my health, I had to make some changes. And I officially, put out there today, my hours now are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And,
Woo!
you know,
Yeah.
uh, and I had a couple people that got upset, okay,
Mhm.
who've already contacted me with, that email that, why, and you've always been there for me and whatever. Um, but one of the things I've learned through coaching is let that email marinate for a while. I don't have to answer it right now because if I would have this morning, I would have answered it in a very angry tone. It'd be like,
Mhm.
it's my life, it's my choice, whatever.
Yeah.
But because I didn't answer it this morning, um, and now we're talking about these things, it makes me realize that it's not that I have to apologize, but just reinstate this is what is best for me. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how can I assist you? Because there may be a way. And if there's not, like you had to give up a client, um, you have to look at those sacrifices.
Yeah, sometimes it's not the best fit. If you went up to someone and you were like, okay, I want you to work all day with not knowing when you start or end your day. I want you answering emails at night during your family time. And I want you to not take a lunch break, take any vacations, and work during the weekends and all holidays. People would be like, no way would I work for you. Ever. Ever.
Exactly.
And yet, as entrepreneurs, we do that to ourselves. We somehow we get into this, there's this toxic productivity mindset of like, I need to do these things. And when you're a startup and you're starting, the only thing you have is your time. Like you don't have the resources, you don't have the clients, you don't have all this other stuff. So I get that point of view as a startup. When it's 4 years down the road and you're still running your business like it's a startup and you're not experiencing some of the freedom that you started your business to begin with, then it's time to have a conversation and say, when do you want your day to start? When do you want your day to end? What are your boundaries? And communicating that with your clients is so important. And we're so worried about losing people or them walking away or being like, I can't believe you're not available at that time. So you're absolutely right. Reinstating, hey, this is what's best for me. And how can I support you? Like, how can I help you within that time frame? And then sometimes I find if they're a client that just needs the security blanket, if you give them the option to say, if it is truly an emergency, if you send me something that says urgent in the title, in the email or the text or whatever, I will know at a glance I have to look at it. Otherwise, I will not be answering any emails after 5 p.m. And that's a normal expectation people who work in offices or work from home with employers, that's a normal expectation. And so sometimes maybe that's not the best fit client too, if they have this expectation that you're always available.
Well, I have a client who we do a podcast called the Intentionality Gurus, and she also is a business and personal coach. And she explained to me that she always considered herself being available for her clients at the drop of a hat. She felt that she had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she did it for a long time, even though she was coaching and helping others not be on demand. And she said one day in the middle of a coaching session, she looked over on the side and she had a little mirror there. And she looked in it and she thought, I got to tell that person in the mirror, they don't have to be on demand anymore. And that's when she said she started to, scale back. And when she told me the story, my first impression was, well, you can do that. I can't. And we've talked about it many times. And she has said to me, it's not up to me to tell you to do it. If you want to do it, you'll figure out when and how. And if you don't want to do it, then you're going to continue on this path and maybe you'll be happy. Maybe you won't be, but it's going to be your choice. Are you ready to make that choice? And I've been saying, yes, yes. And then this morning when I posted this, I sent it to her first and she responded and she said, I take it you're ready. And I said, yeah, because I love what I do, but I was realizing I was getting burned out. And again, I'd be sitting here working through a podcast with you, hearing all these wonderful things. And I'd say, yeah, those are the things I should do. And then I'd go on to my next podcast and I wasn't taking care of me. So explain to our listeners if they're feeling just bogged down, but they don't know what it is. And sometimes we call it depressed. Sometimes we call it anxiety. We all feel we got to give it a name. How should we know that maybe we should be reaching out to a coach versus a doctor or a therapist?
Good, really good question. So in part of my journey, a part of my burnout, when I was there, I got what I almost call like shut down. Like I got to a point where I was going to fix it. And so I took a week off. After 4 years of no vacation, I took an entire week off and that was going to fix everything. And I say that sarcastically because it didn't. I sat there on my couch, and as someone who's like very motivated and very go-getter and very busy all the time, I sat there and I had no energy to do anything. Like taking a shower was a lot of work. Going to the store to get groceries was a lot of work. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed. So that's when I decided, okay, so I have some burnout showing up for me. Yes. And some depression could be showing up for me. So that's when I reached out and I got some additional support. So I was working with my coach, my personal coach, and I was working also with a therapist through the online platform BetterHelp. And so that was good. And we determined that I wasn't experiencing depression. I had some low energy days, but that taking some downtime, some time off was going to help me re-energize and get back to where I had been previously, which did happen. So everybody, as they're listening to this, if you are showing some of the signs of depression, so having really low days, but it's consistent, so it's more than half your week, some of those signs, then it could be useful to go and talk to someone who is a professional who can be a therapist and help you with that. If you're like, hey, I'm feeling some of these frustrations, and the 3 signs of burnout are a lack of energy, a lack of confidence, and a lack of motivation. So I've talked about the lack of energy. The lack of confidence, the way it looked for me was that I had lots of ideas. Like I'm a marketer. So you have to come up with all the solutions and all the ideas. And here's this problem. And let's do this and let's try that. and I had nothing left to give. My well of creativity was dry, nothing, nada, which was also scary to be. And then lack of motivation meant just like nothing was going to work, everything was going to fail. And so, if you're experiencing that, then working with someone to help add some balance into your life, into your daily schedule, could be really beneficial for you. And the difference between like a therapist and a coach is a therapist is going to work on things that are showing up for you now that may be influenced by your past. And a coach is going to help you say, okay, this is where you want to go. We're moving forward. This is where we're helping you get to. So it's more forward thinking. I'm sure that there's crossover and that there's someone that's special that does both or something like that. So that doesn't work for everyone, but in general, that's a good way to look at it. And so I found that adding more balance to my life in multiple ways helps. But if you're hearing this and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even know what to do. My first thing for you, it's a very small suggestion, is just go to your calendar, whatever you use on your phone, whatever, and see how many things you have scheduled for today. And then add an event that's called lunch. And it's a recurring event, and it can take 20 to 30 minutes. And whether you actually take lunch during that time doesn't actually matter. What I want to have happen is you to realize I need to take lunch. I need to take a break. I need to step away from my desk. And so if you're in the flow and it comes and you get that notification, you can put it off as long as you're like, I will do it in 20 minutes or whatever it is. But it's acknowledgement of my body needs nourishment. I need to step away from my desk and I need to take a brain break. I need to let my brain relax. I need to go outside, get some nature, all of those small things. So it sounds really, really simple right now, but all of those small things can help make it so that then when you come back to your work, you're more effective, you're more productive, you
We are having some internet problems. Nicole, we lost your audio for a second.
Oh, okay.
There you are. You're back
Okay.
again. Okay.
There are just little simple tweaks
Right.
that you can make. And so I help people. I give them small suggestions that they can start right now so they can start to see results. And then I work with them on a longer term basis through my course to help them take steps and learn about something. And then the way that we retain it is by actually reflecting on it and working through the challenges that come up with a coach. So that's how we can make more effective and sustainable changes in our lives.
Well, what I want to share with our audience right now is something interesting because of the internet issues. I used to be this type of person that all of a sudden, if something went wrong, and it wasn't the way I expected it, I would get angry. I must have caused it. It's my problem. Everybody's looking at me. It's, why am I so naked here? And one of the things that I learned through coaching and not through therapy was, you don't need to blame anybody, including yourself, when things go wrong. And that's part of the reason for the development of this podcast, because to avoid the maze, you have to walk into those walls. You have to make wrong turns because you're going to learn from it. And it's interesting that so many of us just believe that things have to be perfect all the time, but there's no perfection.
No. I think that honestly, one of the realizations that happened when I was healing from burnout is I realized that I was not showing up authentically. I was showing up fake because I was trying to be perfect all the time. The perfect entrepreneur, the perfect wife, the perfect spouse, insert whatever here. And I got to acknowledge, and I still get to remind myself of this, so don't hear me say that I'm perfect. I've got this down, that I am worthy of love, regardless of what I have done or accomplished or achieved, and that I don't have to be perfect anymore.
Well, and I'm hoping that the youth of today really get that message, because growing up, um, there was a lot of looking in the mirror and seeing the imperfections. Um, my parents never really told me I was imperfect, but there were subtle comments that would be made, and you'd think, oh, I'm not as smart as my one brother. I'm not as talented as the other brother. Um, I still have acne, and my favorite cousin has perfect, complexion. And so you look at all those, but you remember all those negative things that your brain heard, even though maybe they weren't said. Um, and it took me over 50 years to finally wake up one morning and say, wow, why am I letting this weigh me down?
Mhm.
I'm me. I've got a lot of good things. And I actually took a piece of paper and I started writing down what I liked about myself and what I didn't like about myself. And if I could see a way to make those changes on what I didn't like, I
Mhm.
put them in another column. I knew that if I wanted to fix them, I could. There were some I could have cared less about fixing or had no idea. Um, and I've shared this numerous times with people when they'll say to me, so why do you do your podcast? I do it because I want everyone to understand, like you just said, we're worthy of love, but we first have to love ourselves. And
Yep.
if we can't look in the mirror and say at least one nice thing about ourselves each day, why do we expect it from other people?
Right. And I feel like a lot of times we're always giving from a very empty cup, especially as women. We give and give and give and give, and our cup is like barely, we don't have anything left, and we're still trying to give. And that a lot of times we don't take responsibility, that the only person who needs to fill up, who's responsible for filling up your cup, is you. You have to do that. No one else, people can help you do that by like loving on you and stuff like that. That absolutely. But you have to say, I need your love. Can you help support me? I need support over here, or in my business, or in my personal life, or with the dishes, or with dinner, or whatever it is for you. You have to say, I need to fill up. And so, however you do that for yourself, it's no one else's responsibility but your own, because they're trying to fill up themselves as well. So they have to take care of themselves. You have to take care of yourself. And I think a lot of times we forget that, and we don't think about, where am I at? And yet, at the same time, we all know what level our phone battery is at. I
Oh,
can
yeah.
tell you, what level is your phone battery at right now?
Absolutely. You are so correct. So, how do you help your client who is trying to make these personal changes,
Mhm.
and yet the personal changes are affecting their family or their business associates because now you're maybe not as readily available. You may not always be saying, oh, I'll do it.
Mhm.
And you may be asking for more assistance. Um, and I know initially when I started making my changes, my family was supportive. They didn't quite jump in as quickly as I wanted them to. Um, and then I had to think to myself, you know what? What I want them to do isn't necessarily what they're going to do. And I had to start to accept that. It's like, my husband and I have been married 38 years, and every once in a while I'll say to him, you didn't vacuum the bedroom? And he'd look at me and goes, carpet doesn't look dirty. And it's like, yeah, but do you see that I vacuum it, daily? Yeah. But what's another day without it being vacuumed? And I used to get mad, but now it's like, well, that's his perspective. This is mine. But if I would have actually have said to him, I need you to vacuum it, he would have. But just setting the expectation and not giving it a time frame or whatever for him, it's like, if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. And it's okay because I'm a do it now person, but I don't want to be anymore. And so I've got to learn to let that go. So what do you tell your client who says, oh, I'm arguing more with my husband or my boss or my coworkers because I'm changing?
Yeah. So in that situation, it's an opportunity you can only control yourself and your actions, right? So if we're working together and you're saying, I want these boundaries, the second you make that commitment, it's going to come up with a challenge like right away. It happens in my life, it happens in everybody's life. Something happens and you say, oh, yes, I'm going to go do that. And then there's an immediate challenge. Or you're like, I want to leave the office at 5. So then a phone call comes in at 5:05 and it's that client and you're going to talk for an hour. Do you answer it or do you let it go to voicemail? Right? So there are things and you have to make decisions in that time, in that moment. Sometimes it's a communication with someone of picking up the phone and saying like, hey, could you send me an email? I'll read it tomorrow morning. That would be fabulous. I'll get on it at this time. And then acknowledging them and saying, this is when you'll hear back from me. That can help. You can also communicate to other people what your expectations are. So I've had a similar experience with my husband and been like, I don't like having some clutter or things on the floor, right? Clothes. And so I have to decide, am I going to pick that up for you? Or am I going to let the consequences of your actions play out and the dog will chew on it? And then maybe next time you'll pick it up. And I had to shift and realize that I had to let it sit there so that then he could decide what he wanted to do. And then the dog chewed on it and then he picked it up next time. So you're right. It's not perfect. It's never going to be like easy, simple, but that's where you have a coach and you have someone who's on your side that you get to talk to that doesn't live with you and isn't related to you, that cares about you. And then a lot of times what I find is that you have the solution to your own challenges. You just need sometimes someone to talk through them or to share a different idea or say, how could it look different? You're shifting, you're changing, challenges are going to come up right away. Okay, if we normalize that and say, we know that's going to happen, how could it look different? What could we do differently? How can we get support from someone? There's a lot of different ways that it can look in your life. And sometimes just having the opportunity to talk to somebody who has been there and who knows what it's like to be in your shoes and then can help you shift and say, oh, maybe I could try this instead. Then that can be really powerful and a really big opportunity. And maybe you wouldn't have thought of it without that conversation. And that's how you work through it. It's messy. You might be emotionally upset or frustrated or cry. I've cried through so many coaching sessions. And it has helped me learn about myself. It's helped me know where I'm at. It's helped me to identify, oh, I'm trying to change this other person really, really, really bad. And I can't. I can only shift myself and they can either shift towards me or shift away from me.
Well, I'm so glad that you shared that because, like I said, my husband and I have been married 38 years. We've had many, many challenges. This past week, I knew I had to go in for a medical procedure. And when I went to remind him of the time we had to be there, he looked at me and he said, and what is this for? And my initial reaction was, I can't believe you don't know, but I took a step back and I thought, this is very personal to me. And even though it's personal to him, it's not at the same level. And so when I reminded him, it was like, okay, I got it. I understand. I'm supportive. I'm here for you. Um, and when I had the procedure and I came home, I looked fine. Okay.
Mm,
I walked in, I wasn't in pain, but I was instructed to basically go home, lie on the couch, get into bed, and
mhm,
do nothing for 24 hours. And so when I got home, I said I was going to do that, set the expectation.
mhm,
And not like 15 minutes later, he came in asking for something. And I didn't want to get upset with him. So I got out of bed, I went and found it for him. And I said, but what I want our listeners to know is I kept resetting that expectation every time I got up and did something.
mhm,
And I realized, who was I setting it for? He knew by my actions, I was going to get up every time he asked me something. And
mhm,
so it took me a couple of hours before I finally got to the point, because I started thinking about, I'm hurting inside. It's not a physical pain. It's an emotional pain because
mhm,
you aren't listening to me. And what happened? I just talked to him and I said, um, you know, I'm not going to get up. We can
mhm,
work on this tomorrow or at a later date. And he said, well, if that's what you want to do. He still didn't get it. But the next day he said, I have to apologize.
mm,
I forgot you were supposed to be resting for 24 hours.
mhm,
And I realized that it, like you said, it takes doing it over and over again to get comfortable with it. Um, I just believe that I can do everything better than everybody else around me. So
I'm not gonna lie, I think as women, sometimes we feel that way.
absolutely, absolutely. So tell our listeners, how can they find you if they're looking for a coach or they want to learn more about what you do?
Perfect. So, a really easy way, if you're listening to this and you're like, is this applying to me? Where am I at? Where's my balance at? I don't really know. So, I have a really quick quiz, takes like 2 minutes, and it just asks a couple questions about, hey, are these areas where you have balance or you don't have balance, and maybe areas you could work on. So, if you go to my website at myintuitioncoach.com/balance quiz, then you can take that quiz and I'll give you feedback and personalized suggestions after I see your results. And then you can say, oh, cool, that's something that I can work on, or that's something that I want to shift, or I want it to look different in my life. Sometimes we just need that awareness that, oh, it is possible. Other people are doing this. I can do that too. I can make it look this way. And when you were setting those expectations, you're right. You're reinforcing it with yourself and giving yourself permission to take that downtime. And once you did, then you were able to communicate that. So if that is something that someone wants to get better at, then working with me, learning more about how I help specifically people who are successful and struggle to take that free time for themselves to create work-life balance that's sustainable and that they enjoy, then I would love to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Nicole. Avoid the maze. We really don't avoid it. We learn how to walk through it. Um, we're always going to have an obstacle somewhere in our life. But you know what? Trying to getting through it is an accomplishment. And
Yeah.
so it's exciting. Again, have a great day and we'll talk again soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye now.